10 greatest season by a Tennessee quarterback. We love to do this. Smoky hot takes as we look back over the years as the Vols have had quite the history with quarterbacks. So here's what I did. Do we have your story up on offthehooksports.com? Because I purposely avoided it because I wanted to play.
All right, I got it up now.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to look at it, but I'm going to tell you in my lifetime, and we're talking 10 greatest seasons by a Vols quarterback, I would go last year, Hendon Hooker. I would go 97, Peyton Manning. And that's pretty much it. As I go back as a fan to the late 80s, I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but let's take a look at your list if you want to count them down, and then go ahead and get on that message board and tell me what was one of the greatest seasons you ever saw by a Tennessee quarterback. So I kind of got those as my two that I believe stand out. So let's unveil your list. It's on offthehooksports.com, and you can kind of go through that with us. And when you talk about the 10 greatest seasons, you had number one, Peyton Manning, 97. And I'm looking at this for the first time. I purposefully
do you want to count down, build up to the top ones?
Well, no, because I want to kudo myself on saying I got the top two.
Okay.
And then you got Hendon Hooker 2022. Now we'll count down. So you start with a guy that had a whip. If he had a David Cutcliffe in his life, he's probably winning Super Bowls and an All-Pro. And his name kind of sounds like Tom Brady, except it's Tyler Bray, same initials.
Yeah, this was very, very hard for me to do because Tyler Bray had the worst intangibles, the worst leadership qualities, and the most apathetic approach to the game. He was the Jamarcus Russell of Tennessee football. And I don't throw that
without the scissor problem.
Without the scissor problem, didn't care whether Tennessee won, didn't care whether they lost, but I can't ignore the stats in 2012. That is, outside of Peyton Manning in 97 for a pocket passer, the most productive year statistically a pocket passer has ever had at Tennessee outside of Peyton Manning in 97. And so I put it on the list because it's not necessarily his fault that Tennessee went 5-7 that year. He didn't hire Sal Sinceri to coach the defense.
True. So, Mr. Jones says T. Martin, 1998. I'm putting that third on my list. Here's a couple of reasons why. Because as you'll read in the Celebrate, I know, but as you'll read in the Celebrate 98 book that we're going to have coming out very shortly, and excited about that. It goes to publisher next week. But T. Martin could have done more, chose not to do more without griping about it because they didn't feel like he was ready to do more and wanted to be more of a running football team. He also had the big play against Syracuse that converted in a first down, the run. He had a couple of other key runs that year. So the fact that I believe he could have done more, he just threw for 2,100 yards, could have done more. I would have him higher on your list. But yes, probably 3 is a little too high. 8, Casey Clausen, 2003. That was kind of the last year, if you covered Tennessee football or followed them closely, that you just kind of thought Tennessee would have elite, ice in their veins quarterbacks for the rest of the duration of the program. And as we've learned, that's not necessarily the case. But Casey Clausen in 2003, why?
Well, I debated between 2003 and 2001 Casey Clausen. 01 actually technically was a little bit more efficient of a passer, but 01 had Dante Stallworth, Kelly Washington, Jason Witten, and the SEC's best running game. Casey Clausen had you remember this, 03, who was his best receiver? It was a converted quarterback. And he had no running game that year whatsoever because Jabari Davis was his feature tailback for most of the year, who wasn't that good of a running back, honestly. And so I think that Casey Clausen, he was the offense in 03. I mean, it was really just him by himself carrying that. And he threw 27 touchdowns. Again, one of the most productive years statistically, threw for 3,000 yards. So that was enough for me to put him in the top 10, 03.
Yep. Peyton Manning, 1995. That was his breakout season. You stop me when you want to jump in here. Heath Schuler in 1993. That wasn't David Cutcliffe's type of quarterback as we saw moving forward with the Mannings, but he was fantastic in that year. Then you have Eric Ainge in 2007. You talk about a turnaround. You get David Cutcliffe back involved. And I think it was really simplified. I think it's what Texas A&M is hoping Bobby Petrino will do as the offensive coordinator there. It just kind of simplified everything in 2007. Didn't try to be too cute. And they had better talent than most of the teams they played. And Eric Ainge would have been one of the players that was more talented than most of the players he played.
Well, yeah, and also you got to remember that 07 year, Eric Ainge lost his go-to receiver in Robert Meacham. And Tennessee's best receiver in 07 was Lucas Taylor, and no one's going to confuse Lucas Taylor with one of the best receivers in Tennessee history. Yet he gained 1,000 yards that year, and I think he gained 1,000 yards because of Eric Ainge's accuracy. And the big story with Eric Ainge that year, Dave, do you remember? I think that's still the least sacked team in SEC football history because Eric Ainge got rid of the ball so quickly.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that still sticks in there. I think that record's still there. Now, you had Hendon Hooker 2021. Then you had Joshua Dobbs 2016 at number 3 before we get to Hooker 2022 and Manning 97. So talk about Hooker, Dobbs 21, 16 respectively. And then we had a question on the message board about Jonathan Crompton that I want to address.
So 2021 Hooker, and you could actually have a debate for 2021 versus 2022 Hooker. If you look at the stats, it was just he got sacked so much more in 2021 because of his pocket presence. But I mean, Dave, can anybody argue with 36 touchdowns and 3 interceptions? I mean, that's like insane. I got Josh Dobbs number 3, and you almost could have made a case for Dobbs at number 2. Dave, you may not know this, but in terms of total offense by quarterbacks, Dobbs' 2016 season is second only to Peyton Manning's in 97, and he was doing that with Butch Jones as his coach, not Josh Heupel. So there's an argument for Dobbs at that season at second right there.
Now, I think you could argue Dobbs for second. I think here's my top 5 in not a particular order. And I am factoring in team success. And I hate it when people say, oh, this guy won 4 Super Bowls, so he's automatically a great quarterback. That shouldn't be a stat, but team success does mean something. So before I get to my 5, success means calling Andy Mason at andymasonrealestate.com. You've got the number there. You've got the form fill where you can get the best service, the best prices in East Tennessee. I'm proud to tell you about andymasonrealestate.com. If you have any sort of real estate move that you need to make, best service, best prices in the best, andymasonrealestate.com. Support our advertisers so we can keep coming to you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. So my top 5 would consist of Hendon Hooker number 1 in 2022, Peyton Manning number 2 in 1997. I'm giving your guy Josh Dobbs a shout out for 3 because I think he overcame bad coaching. So I'm adding in a lot of extracurriculars. I thought that what Heath Schuler did, I would have him in my top 5. Again, no particular order in 93. He was just really fearless when it came to going on the road. And then I'm going to have T. Martin in my top 5 because I believe he could have done more. He chose not to do more because that was the best for the team. So that's my top 5 in no particular order. So finally, we disagree on something. This has been the biggest,
and you're
like we've been hugging it out.
You are so wrong on Peyton Manning and Hendon Hooker and compare it. Like Peyton Manning in 97 is the gold standard. And I'm going to tell you a couple of reasons why. Peyton Manning did not have a Biletnikoff winner he was throwing to at receiver. And I'm going to tell you this right now, Cedric Till, his go-to receiver was Marcus Nash. Dave, what did Marcus Nash do in the NFL?
Not much.
Complete flame out. Peyton Manning did not have Josh Heupel coaching him. You could say David Cutcliffe, but David Cutcliffe wasn't the guy that maximized quarterback stats the way Josh Heupel did. And Peyton Manning, statistically, production-wise, that is the number 1 total offense year ever by a quarterback. And Peyton Manning didn't even have any rushing yards to add to his total offense because he couldn't run. Pure pocket passer. And so it's easily Peyton Manning, and he won the SEC title, which, say what you want, Hendon Hooker didn't do.
Mr. Jones said it for me. Hooker made the Biletnikoff winner. I agree with that. So I have no problem putting Hendon Hooker. We'll find out, but I have no problem putting Hendon Hooker above the 97 team.
And also,
Travis says Peyton made Marvin Harrison too, which
he did. He did. Marvin Harrison was an average receiver until Peyton Manning got to Indy. And look at the stats, people who question me. I would actually take Tom Brady's receivers in the early 2000s, Deion Branch and Troy Brown over Marvin Harrison. You can call me crazy on that, but I would.
No, I could argue that.
The other point you make about T. Martin.
I can't even remember who played opposite Marvin Harrison at this very moment.
This was before Reggie Wayne, so
yeah, Reggie Wayne was kind of Reggie Wayne was a real deal. I think we would argue with that.
He was better than Marvin.
No
I would say this with T. Martin because
not at killing people.
Oh my gosh!
Sorry,
you keep saying, and I hear Fred say this, and I don't like to be disrespectful like this because I have a lot of respect for T. Martin, but everybody acts like he was held back in '98. Dave, Randy Sanders turned T. Martin loose in '99, and he was much less efficient. There's a reason Cutcliffe kept the harness on T. Martin. And now you could argue maybe it's because Cutcliffe wasn't calling the plays in '99. I might listen to you, but you tell me, was it more the Cutcliffe to Sanders transition, or was it more Martin wasn't capable of taking that large of a role?
Probably a little bit of both.